She clocked out under hospital fluorescence and reached for coffee. She woke to cold metal walls and the smell of rubber and gasoline. Wrong woman, right man. Letting her go would cost him everything. Welcome to Afro-Korean Stories HQ. Like and subscribe for more love thrillers with impossible choices. Rain stitched neon into the Busan night as Dr. Amara Okonkwo stepped off the curb behind Busan General. It was the hour when the ER quiets just enough for memories to get loud. She tucked her badge into her pocket, tugged her hood up, and thought about Kelechi, her kid brother, swallowed by a pipeline no one at immigration could name. She never let herself stand still long. Moving meant not drowning. The van didn't come screeching like in movies. It rolled to the alley mouth and simply absorbed her. A door slid. A hand in nitrile pressed her face down. Tape bit her wrists. Two voices argued in Korean. One said a name she didn't recognize. The other said, "Close enough." And the world narrowed to the thud of her pulse against plastic. When the bag came off, she was on a leather chaise under recessed lights. A pulse ox beeping somewhere to her left. Not a hospital. Hospitals smelled like bleach and coffee. This place smelled like cedar and money. A wall of glass revealed a garden gleaming with rain, bamboo shivering in the wind. Cameras winked in the corners like patient stars. "Dr. Cheon?" a man asked, hopeful, from the foot of the bed. "I'm not Dr. Cheon," Amara said, voice dry as old paper. "And you have the wrong woman." Silence, then a door side open. He entered without hurry. Navy suit, no tie. Shirt sleeves rolled just enough to show wrists, bearing thin white scars if you knew where to look. Han Jae-won had the kind of face that made men straighten and made women misjudge. It wasn't beauty, it was calibration, the sense that everything in him was measured to a line you couldn't see. His gaze took her in the way surgeons take scans. Badge indent on the pocket, wrist redness from tape, dried rain in her curls, calluses on her fingers from retraction and sutures. Not the woman they wanted. Not disposable, either. "Not Cheon," he agreed softly, "but a doctor. Trauma surgeon," she said. "Off duty, kidnapped on a public street. That is still a crime in your country." One of the men at the door shifted, eyes flicking to Jae-won as if bracing for weather. Jae-won didn't blink. He picked up a phone from the sideboard without looking and said a single word into it. "Ready." A second door swung and revealed a body on a gurney, pale beneath a half-zipped jacket. Blood had leaked a pattern down his flank like a map. Someone had thrown a towel on the wound and called it sterile. Amara sat up. "If you want him alive, I need a sterile field. Suction, 2 units oneg, light I can aim, and consent. From him, not you." Do-yun, the man at the door with the storm eyes, snorted. "Consent? It's the difference between medicine and assault," she said, standing, ignoring the way her legs shook. "That towel is becoming a petri dish. He's bleeding into his retroperitoneum. You have 15 minutes of luck before it becomes math." Jae-won watched the way she stepped around the gurney, checked pupils, palpated gently. "No panic, only triage." "Dr. Yu," he called. An older man with neat hair and tired hands appeared like a sigh. "I told them not to move him," Dr. Yu Min muttered, already pushing a tray into place. He glanced at Amara. A nod passed between people who know the same language under different flags. "Consent," Amara repeated, eyes on the patient's face. "Can you hear me? I'm Dr. Okonkwo. I need to operate to stop the bleeding. I'll keep you breathing. Do I have your permission?" The man blinked once, twice. A whisper scraped his throat. "Yes." Jae-won's jaw tipped a millimeter. He gestured. The room obeyed. Lights sharpened. A cart rattled. Gloves snapped. Amara washed like it was the first thing she'd done all day, and the last thing she would do on Earth, fingers moving through the ritual that steadied ghosts. Do-yun leaned toward Jae-won. "This is liability," he said softly. "Compassion is how kings fall." Jae-won didn't answer. He was watching Amara's hands, the steadiness, the certainty, the way she made men who'd broken 100 bones hold their breath like boys. They cut, they clamped, they suctioned. The bleeding hid and then revealed itself like a shy animal. "Doctor." Yu kept up, impressed despite himself when Amara improvised a retractor with a metal ruler and a rolled towel. The beeping on the monitor found a rhythm and decided to stay. When they were done, the room exhaled. Amara peeled her gloves, pressed a clean bandage with the heel of her hand, and finally let her eyes find the man who owned the silence. "That," she said, nodding toward the patient, Stays alive if you stop moving him like furniture and stop using towels like tourniquets. You're in my house, Jae-won said, voice calm as rain. And yet you set the rules. I'm a doctor, she replied. That used to mean something, even in houses like this. Something like a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, then died. He picked up a tablet from the sideboard and flicked. Dr. Amara Okonkwo, Federal Medical Center Umuahia before Seoul. Moved to Busan 2 years ago. Languages: English, Igbo, Medical Korean. Volunteer shifts at the migrant clinic on Yeongdo. 1 missing sibling, Kalechi. Your calls to immigration 37 in 6 months. She didn't flinch. You did your homework. I do on everyone who crosses my threshold, voluntarily or otherwise. His gaze didn't waver. Tonight you crossed because my men made a mistake. You think? She said, dry enough to crack. He set the tablet down like it weighed more than glass. The man on that gurney is alive because of you. I don't leave loose ends. I'm not your loose end, she said. I'm your surgeon until morning. Then you let me walk out that door. Do-yoon's laugh was a short knife. Jae-won didn't look at him. Doctor, he said, hospitals ask questions. They write reports. They call police. My world, he glanced at the cameras, requires fewer witnesses. My world requires consent and sterile technique. Amara shot back. So far one of us has standards. A beat of quiet. The rain moved across the glass like someone drawing blinds. Jae-won stepped closer. Not enough to threaten, just enough to make the air change temperature. You'll remain here tonight. You'll check him in 2 hours, and you will tell me what you need so he does not die. And then? Amara asked. He considered the garden instead of her eyes. Then I decide what it costs to let you walk out of here. A pause. And whether I can afford it. She held his gaze until he blinked. Make sure the linens are real sterile this time, she said, turning back to the patient. And if you ever put a towel on a wound again, I'll teach your men the difference with a suture kit and no anesthetic. Do-yoon choked on a cough that might have been respect. Dr. Yu hid a smile. Jae-won walked to the glass and watched the bamboo sway. In the reflection, he saw a woman who refused to bend in a room built to force kneeling. He had built an empire out of numbers, roots, and leverage. He had never accounted for a variable with a heartbeat. Outside, a siren wailed somewhere far enough to feel like another life. Inside, the monitor ticked steady. Jae-won's phone buzzed with a single message. Seo-jin asking a question without a question mark. He muted it and looked back at Amara. She was pressing 2 fingers to the patient's pulse, lips counting seconds. In that moment, he understood a truth that tasted like copper. Letting her go would be the most expensive thing he'd ever do. Morning in the compound wore someone else's idea of peace bamboo, combed by wind, white porcelain cups on lacquered trays, a garden that pretended the city didn't have teeth. Amara woke to an IV and a locked door that opened when she spoke, and a corridor that smelled faintly of cedar and antiseptic because she demanded it. By noon, she had taken the clinic apart and rebuilt it with tape, markers, and a will that made men older than the furniture move faster. She taped a triage chart to a glass wall, wrote out sterile protocols like commandments, and sent Do-yoon's runners for bleach, chlorhexidine, sutures that weren't the bargain bin kind. Doctor, Yumin watched her with the exhausted relief of a man who'd been jury-rigging an OR with hope and paperclips. You're captive, Yu murmured, signing off a supply list. But you work like the chief of surgery. I am the chief of not. Letting people die on dirty sheets, Amara said, pulling a mask over her face. And I'm billing an attitude. Word traveled fast in kingdoms. By evening, men who'd never said please began saying, doctor, like it tasted unfamiliar. One of them, a broad-shouldered smuggler with a scar like a river delta on his cheek, dragged in a boy, 17 maybe, sweat-glossed, clutching his belly as if it might spill. The smuggler tried to explain in broken English, then in a shrug, mule, bag stuck. A whisper of disgust moved through the clinic, not at the smuggler, at the boy. Amara put a hand on the kid's forehead. Heat rolled under her palm. We need imaging. Doctor. You said, already moving. No time, Amara answered, eyes tracing the boy's rigid abdomen. He's peritoneal. It ruptured. She looked up at the scarred man. If you were planning to dispose of him, you're going to be disappointed. The man opened his mouth. Jae-won appeared instead of his answer. Problem? He asked, and the room straightened itself out. Amara didn't defer. She never learned how. A child used as a container is about to die. He needs a controlled environment, not a ditch. Clear the room. You, prep for exploratory. I want that autoclave humming. The smuggler drew breath, found Jae-won's eyes, and thought better of it. Orders moved without noise. The clinic became a theater. Amara cut, swore softly when her blade met a mess of terry poison and torn intestine, and got to work. You handed without being asked. They cleaned the spill, repaired what could be repaired, irrigated like they were washing a curse away. When the boy slept with new pink in his cheeks, Amara stripped her gloves and turned toward the doorway where Jae-won waited like a shadow that had learned manners. Your men wanted to throw him out, she said. I will not be useful to you if you make me complicit in murder. Jae-won's gaze flicked to the sleeping boy. You call it murder. My men called it policy. Then change the policy, Amara replied. Or stop pretending you brought me here for anything but death. Do-yeon's mouth tightened. You forget where you stand, he said. I never forget, she said, tired and unblinking. It's what keeps people alive. They stared long enough for the bamboo to rattle. Jae-won broke first. He stays, he said. Heals, then leaves. Alive. He glanced at the smuggler. And if anyone lays a hand on him, you'll wish the doctor had your conscience. The smuggler swallowed, uncertainty briefly more frightening than bullets. He bowed, to the wrong person, and left fast. Thank you, Amara said to you, not to Jae-won. Jae-won accepted the slight like a man collecting debts for later. Your standards make this house expensive, he said. Life is expensive, she countered, reaching for a chart. You just never noticed who's been paying. Night came with teeth. Lights flickered once, twice, then failed. The clinic hummed a brief red under emergency strips. Somewhere deeper in the compound, shouting, the crack of something hard against metal, the smell of electricity turning into smoke. Down, Do-yeon barked, stepping in front of the glass like his spine could stop a bullet. Seo-jin. The name dropped the temperature by 5 degrees. You shoved a kit into Amara's hands without looking. If we have to move, grab the airway, he said. Gunfire stitched the air. Amara took the boy's hand, then let it go, because 2 guards slammed into the clinic at once. One left a comet of blood on the floor. The other left a trail of curses. Ambush at the south gate, one panted in Korean. They cut power. Here, Amara said, fingers already on the first man's neck. He's tacky. Breath sounds decreased right. Tension pneumo. She snapped at you. 14 gauge, second intercostal. Move. Do-yeon flinched, but he held. The doorway, calm as a drawn blade. Jae-won appeared through the red light with a flashlight and a mouth set like a locked safe. Hold that, Amara said, pointing, and Jae-won lifted the beam to paint a ribcage in light. She found the space, counted, and drove the needle home, a hiss like a dragon dying. The man's chest fell. He breathed like air wasn't a stranger. Good, Amara said, and then everything got louder. The second guard sagged, eyes rolling. Blood bubbled at his lips. Airway. Gurney to the hallway, she ordered, already moving. Storage rooms closer. We make an OR there. They moved through a corridor lit like hell's emergency exit. Jae-won bracketed Amara with his body, one hand on her shoulder, moving her left, then right, as if he knew where bullets would prefer to go. She felt the heat of him through thin cotton, and didn't have the bandwidth to be afraid of that, too. The storage room stank of iodine and new paint. They turned a metal table into a miracle. You slapped a laryngoscope into Amara's palm. The generator coughed, died, coughed again. I can't see cords, she said, breath steady by force. We go surgical if I can't intubate. He's desatting. Tell me what to do. Jae-won said, light unwavering. She didn't look at him. Don't move the beam. Count with me. 2 centimeters below the thyroid cartilage, feel the notch? Good. Prep. Scalpel. Steel-kissed skin. Blood slicked her glove. The room shrank to the size of a trachea, and her world narrowed to an opening she could make with will and a blade. Tube, she said. Now. You fed, she found. The tube slid. The guard coughed around plastic and then pulled breath like it was the first thing he'd done right all day. The monitor she'd dragged in blinked sluggish green. Relief dropped through the room like a stone into deep water. You sagged against a cabinet. Do-yeon let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Outside, the gunfire stepped farther away, then farther again. Amara's hands hovered over the guard's face, a beat too long. She closed her eyes and exhaled. When she opened them, Jae-won was still there, still holding the light as if he were afraid of the dark, only when it was hers. He set the flashlight down. The room was red in shadow and the sound of a man choosing to live. Jae-won reached for Amara like a man who had not asked permission in years and didn't recognize himself for asking now. The kiss was not polite. It was the first inhale after drowning, the clatter of instruments when the table stops shaking, the soft animal sound a body makes when it gets to keep being a body. He tasted of adrenaline and winter mint, and the admission he couldn't say out loud. For a heartbeat, Amara didn't push him away. For a heartbeat, she let herself want something that wasn't survival. Then she put her palm flat against his chest and pushed. Not hard. Enough. "This is wrong," she said, voice hoarse. "This," she gestured at the hallway, "the tube, the blood, is wrong." Jae-won stepped back. Whatever moved behind his eyes wasn't anger. It was recognition, the terrible kind. He nodded once, as if agreeing with a judge. Do-yeon cleared his throat from the doorway. He didn't comment on the kiss. He didn't have to. "Southgate secure," he reported. "Casualties minimal." Seo-jin left a present. The present came as a buzzing on Jae-won's phone. He tapped, and the storage room forgot how to breathe. Grainy video. A courier on his knees, hands bound, a gloved hand gripping his hair like a handle. A woman's voice off camera, purring in steel. "Return my medic," Kang Seo-jin said. "Or watch your empire bleed out. Slow." The courier screamed once, sharp and short. The video cut to black. "You swore." Do-yoon's jaw bladed. Amara stood very still, the tube in a stranger's throat beneath her fingers, the taste of a man she should not want on her mouth. Jae-won watched the blank screen for the length of a choice, and then looked at the clinic door as if it were a horizon. "Doctor," he said, voice low, "we have to talk about the cost." "Doctor," Jae-won said, phone dark in his hand, "we have to talk about the cost." It turned out the conversation had an audience. By morning, Madame Hae-jin arrived like a proverb. Silk the color of rain clouds, hair pinned with steel, eyes older than any ledger. She took in the clinic, the sleeping boy, the blood drying on the floor that someone had missed, and then she took in Amara, as if weighing thread for a stitch that would either save or strangle. "You learn to cut away rot," she told her nephew without preamble, voice soft enough to sting. "Cut this, or it will cut you." Do-yeon stood behind her, a warning in a suit. "She's already changing the house," he said. "Men ask her permission to breathe." Hae-jin's gaze never left Amara. "Not a prize," she said. "A weakness. And the cruelest kind, the kind that makes you imagine a different life." Amara didn't bow. "I'm not a weakness," she said. "I'm a line you can't cross and stay who you think you are." "That is exactly what a weakness sounds like," Hae-jin murmured, and the smallest smile ghosted her mouth, like she appreciated the blade's honesty. The roof that night was a sheet of black glass, the city smeared beneath it in streaks of light. Wind tried to pull hair from Amara's braid. It didn't dare. Jae-won stood at the edge and looked like a man rehearsing peace against a skyline that didn't buy it. "When my father died," he said, fingers on the cold railing, "I stood here and did the math. How many men would come for me if I jumped? How many would come if I didn't? Obligation kept me alive. Not love, not hope. Obligation." He glanced at her. "You are the first thing that makes me want to be." "Wanting isn't enough," Amara said. The wind tasted like salt and future. "You built arteries that move pain. You don't get to call yourself clean because you use sterile gauze." He nodded once, a decision landing. "Then we do this in daylight." He turned from the edge and became what men obey. Neutral ground. Elders watching. "I offer a price no one refuses." "Freedom," Amara said. "Not just a ride to a different lock. Freedom that sticks," he answered. "Permanent invisibility for you. No retaliation, no whispers." "And the cost?" she asked. "The empire," he said, almost gently. "Pieces of it." Fog made the dock small, like the cranes were toys, and the sea was a rumor. Men who had built lives out of silence stood with hands folded while the elders watched. Kang Seo-jin arrived in black that turned the fog into smoke and wore a smile shaped like a blade. She didn't look at Amara. That would have made the doctor too real. She looked at Jae-won as if they were playing baduk on a board the size of a city. "My medic," Seo-jin said. "Not yours," Jae-won said. "Never was." "Then war," she purred. "Peace," he countered, and laid it out in a voice that made accountants of wolves. 2 terminals, the Western Yard and Pier 7, the customs line at Yongdo, and Lee Kang-sik's seat on the council my protection there. In exchange, you will never speak her name, touch her shadow, or breathe in her direction. The elders witness, the house enforces. No one profits from breaking it. Do-yoon went still, like a bomb deciding if it would be honorable. The elders murmured. One, old enough to remember 3 wars, nodded as if he'd been waiting to measure this boy since he was 10. Seo-jin's smile thinned, not broken, just stretched. That is a king's ransom, she said, for a ghost with a scalpel. For my mistake, Jae-won said. He took the pen, signed once, then pricked his thumb with the same knife that had cut 100 ties and pressed the blood to the paper. Old Wright in a new suit. Witness. The elder sealed it. The cranes watched like tall, patient birds. Seo-jin's eyes filmed over with the pleasure of winning. Enjoy your smaller kingdom, she said, and walked into the fog with 2 terminals in her pocket. It should have felt like victory. It felt like a vein stitched closed and a different one opened up in the dark. Back at the compound, the storm had washed the garden clean. Amara stood under the eaves and watched a boy trim bamboo with the careful hands of someone who had learned not to break anything he couldn't pay for. The stoop of his shoulders, the scar on his wrist jagged, a bad-healed cut she knew like a birthmark. Kelechi, she said, not loud. The name fell from her mouth like a prayer that thought it was a secret. The boy froze, turned. The face was older, thinner, but the eyes were the same ones that had followed her around a kitchen in Umuahia, begging for extra stew. Dee, he whispered, Igbo cracking under a Korean alias. Her knees almost forgot how to be knees. She crossed the wet stones, hands out, as if approaching a wild animal that might bolt. How? She asked, voice breaking and assembling at once. He glanced at the cameras the way people learn to glance when glances keep you alive. They brought me in with others, he said, Korean bleeding at the edges. A man at the port, papers with the wrong name. Work here. Don't ask. His mouth trembled. I thought you were gone. Jae-won stopped 3 paces away, as if he had hit a glass wall only he could see. Do-yoon's curse was a whisper he swallowed whole. Hae-jin watched without blinking, grief for a life that wasn't hers crossing her face like a shadow passing over water. Amara pulled Kelechi into her, fingers mapping the scar on his wrist like reading Braille. When she looked up, her eyes were hope and weapon. I will not leave. Without him, she said. And not while the others he came with stay trapped in your roots. I won't let you buy my freedom with their suffering. Jae-won looked at the garden the way a surgeon looks at a scan that says the rot is everywhere. He saw ledgers like coffins. He heard Seo-jin's laughter already riding the wind toward the empty piers he'd just gifted her. He felt the shape of a promise tightening around his throat and found it felt like a vow instead of a noose. He stepped closer to the siblings, to the line that would either save him or end him. Then we cut out the rot, he said, and this time his voice didn't shake. All of it. They started that night. Jae-won called in the captains and spoke like a scalpel, not a gavel. The gray maritime arm dissolved. The shell companies signed away with a pen that dragged like a blade. Do-yoon fed off-books ledgers into a steel drum, flame-licking the pages until numbers curled into ash. Encrypted drops hit. Inboxes that would survive daylight. Manifests, faces, payments, a councilman's quiet texts. Hae-jin watched with her hands folded, the rare pride of a surgeon who had taught a boy to cut, and now watched him choose where. Men protested. Men who'd built fortunes on silence suddenly found their throats full of questions. Jae-won did not raise his voice. This ends, he said. Or I do. It turned out gravity worked even on kings. The roots shuddered like eyes. Trucks rerouted and then stopped. Phones rang and were not answered. The water at Pier 7, newly gifted away, slapped the pilings as if laughing. Jae-won let it. He had signed the cost. Extraction moved under rain with headlights off. 2 vans, 3 motorbikes, 1 promise holding them together. Amara climbed into the back with a go bag and a blanket, hands already gloved. They collected Kelechi first. No argument. Just a brother's fingers locking in a sister's and refusing to unlock. Then 3 more. A girl who hadn't spoken in 2 days. A boy with a fever and the eyes of an old man. Another whose wrists still remembered zip ties. Amara checked pulses, pushed fluids, murmured Igbo and English and the language of mothers to mouths that had forgotten their own. Jae-won stood outside the safe house door, eyes on the street, on the shadowed windows, on the calculus of betrayal. He heard laughter once, a short, shocked burst from inside, and closed his eyes like a man taking communion. The papers came at dawn, consular cover acquired by favors he didn't know he still had. Amara lined the kids up like they were heading into sunlight, not exile. Kelechi squeezed her hand so tight it must have hurt. She didn't complain. "You kept your word," she told Jae-won at the threshold. The sentence was simple and heavier than gold. "I'll keep mine." "What is your word?" he asked, because he wanted to hear it said. "A clinic," she said, "where we don't buy anyone's. Safety with someone else's suffering." She paused, and for the first time since the van door slammed days ago, her eyes softened without breaking. "Live a life you don't have to hide from, Han Jae-won." He didn't reach for her. He didn't kiss her. He nodded like a man accepting a sentence he had chosen. "Go," he said, and the word made something crack and pour out of him, warm and necessary. The convoy slid into morning. In the safe-house kitchen, a plastic table waited with paper bowls and cheap chopsticks. Kelechi slurped noodles loud enough to make Amara laugh and cry at the same time. It tasted like victory, like salt, like breath. Jae-won walked the garden once, touched the bamboo Kelechi had trimmed, and stepped into a house that no longer lied about what it was. The throne was smaller now. The air was cleaner. Predators would circle the empty docks and test the fences. He would meet them with fewer men and steadier hands. Some empires fell to enemies. He realized, had fallen to a doctor who refused to break her oath, and in the falling, taught him how to stand. Thanks for watching from Afro-Korean Stories HQ. Want more Beautify love stories like this? Then like, share, and subscribe for more engaging contents like this. Also tell me your thoughts and where you are watching this love story from. I want to know how far this love story has traveled.